of the first chapter. Swami invites the hippies. It's a very long chapter because this is where Prabhupada picked up a lot of devotees. This chapter goes on for 50 pages. So we're nearing the completion of the chapter. Prabhupada, we know, is in San Francisco. He opened the Radha Krishna temple there. And we have to remember that Srila Prabhupada was an erudite scholar coming from the holy dham of Sri Vrindavan. Never forgot Krishna for a moment of his life. And here he is in the midst of savages, practically. Highly disillusioned young boys and girls who are looking for a purpose in life. And Krishna has sent Srila Prabhupada to make them all into devotees of Krishna. And it's absolutely amazing how this was accomplished. And today we'll hear about, shastrically, how Prabhupada was able to perform this miracle of turning the miserable, dirty, misguided hippies into brilliant devotees. After 20 minutes, many of the young dancers were leaping, jumping, and perspiring as Prabhupada continued to sing, leading the dancers by the beat of his kartals. His eyes were closed, yet he controlled the entire wild congregation, playing his kartals loudly. The chanting and dancing continued, and Prabhupada approved. So whenever Prabhupada would be leading the kirtan, of course he would be in front of the devotees, and we as his disciples, our eyes would just be on Prabhupada, watching every single movement he made, how he played the kartals so we could learn how to play like that, every detail. We were so fortunate to have that opportunity to watch Prabhupada personally. Now we see it also in the videos. So by watching the pure devotee, not to imitate, but to follow in his footsteps, anukaran and anusharan. So this anusharan, watching Srila Prabhupada, how he did things, he set the example so that all of his disciples, all of his followers, could learn how to please Krishna by performing Krishna consciousness in a pleasing way. The kirtan of these hippies was different from the chanting of Indian Brahmins, but Prabhupada didn't mind. His standard was devotion. In his Radha Krishna temple, whatever he accepted, Krishna accepted. This was his offering to Krishna through his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Prabhupada was absolutely confident. So the whole program, beginning from Lord Krishna himself, Sarva Dharmam Padhijaja Mamekam Saranam Braja, at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, when he gives his instructions for all of us to surrender to him, become his devotees, and he'll protect us. But then he had to go fight the war. So he didn't give us examples of how we should surrender, how we should render service. And then when Lord Chaitanya came, he showed us the process by chanting, by dancing, taking prasadam, all of the 9 processes of devotional service. That was 500 years ago. Coming through the disciplic succession, now in this modern age, how do we apply the principles of 5,000 years ago, 500 years ago, to the present day? And this is the mystery of how the Acharya is able to take the timeless wisdom of the Vedas and apply it to the particular time and circumstances in which we're living. So Prabhupada, there were no Brahmins. What was the temple? It was called a Radha Krishna temple. There were no deities. Prabhupada hadn't installed deities yet. But there was one thing, and that was the chanting of Hare Krishna. And that chanting of Hare Krishna brought the whole spiritual world to that one small little storefront called the Radha Krishna temple. Even if his young devotees didn't know how to play the harmonium, keyboard, or the mridanga, even if they didn't know that congregational kirtan should be done not in constant unison as they were doing, but responsively, and even if they didn't know how to honor the Guru, still, because they were chanting and dancing, he encouraged them and nodded to them, yes. Now here, when Prabhupada was present with us, of course, Srila Prabhupada opened the temple in 1975, and he left us just 2 years afterwards. So a lot of the time that he spent here was when it was under construction. The temple hadn't even been opened, there was no puja going on, nothing like that. But the devotees, they were so eager to please Srila Prabhupada, just by the movement of his hand, hundreds and hundreds of devotees would be dancing and chanting in ecstasy, jumping in the air. So that was how Prabhupada, just like a circus, you know, and then all the animals. So it was like that with Srila Prabhupada. He just had to move his hand a little bit, and we would all be dancing in ecstasy. And sometimes he would take the flowers from his feet and throw into the crowd more ecstasy, as if they were going to hit the chandeliers in the temple. Wild elements were there, of course. Peoples whose minds and intentions were far away in some chemically induced fantasy. Yet the mood was dominated by Srila Prabhupada's followers, who danced with arms upraised because Prabhupada taught them the Swami step, how to dance, and watched their leader carefully. Although in many ways they were still like hippies, they were Swamiji's disciples, and they wanted to please him and follow his instructions. They wanted to attain Krishna consciousness. For all the varied punctuation of horns and timpani, kettle drum, you see that big drum there? That was the masterpiece of the temple, to have that big drum that Mukunda used to play. It's called a timpani. The kirtan remained sweet. Hayagriva even played his cornet in tune, and only during every other mantra. So gradually Prabhupada was training the devotees in the art of kirtan. And now we have books on the different regulations that Prabhupada gave for kirtan. But we'll find in a few moments how Srila Prabhupada was using a particular mantra that you just start chanting. You chant, you become purified. Once you're purified, then Prabhupada would begin introducing different rules and regulations. For now, he was just letting everyone chant. Everyone was chanting together, not hearing the leader and then chanting. They didn't know any better. Gradually, Prabhupada would introduce all of these regulations. Srila Prabhupada knew that some aspects of the kirtan were wrong or below standard, but he accepted the offering, and not awkwardly, but lovingly. He simply wanted these American boys and girls to chant. That they dressed irregularly, jumped too savagely, or had the wrong philosophy did not over-concern him. These boys and girls were chanting Hare Krishna, so at least for the present, they were pure. The hippies knew that too, and they loved it. Because in America at that time, there was a lot of freedom of the youth. They could leave their family, they could live however they wanted, not follow any regulative principles, no morality whatsoever, and they were miserable. So when they finally came in contact with Srila Prabhupada and saw that here's a person who can actually teach them about the purpose of life, how one should live, how one can become happy, so they took his instructions, everything he said, very seriously. And gradually, by chanting, by hearing, by serving, they became purified so that they could then teach others. And that's how more and more temples were created. Just as in Janaki's dream, remember she had a dream, she told Prabhupada that he was sitting on a big chair and the whole world was chanting Hare Krishna with him. Prabhupada liked that dream very much. Govinda Dasi had a similar dream, and then she painted this picture, this painting of Prabhupada on the chair. Srila Prabhupada's pleasure was to see the whole world engaged in kirtan. Somehow or other, he would say, people should be engaged in Krishna consciousness. And this was the instruction of Lord Chaitanya's chief follower, Rupa Goswami, who had written, Tasmat kain ap upayena mana Krishna niveshayet. Somehow or other, fix the mind on Krishna. The rules and regulations can come later. Now, Rupa Goswami did not create that sloka. We'll see where it comes from. He included in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in the very early chapters, when he was describing the not qualifications, the different types of devotional service and what happens when you perform devotional service. So the same sloka is there, and the translation in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is, somehow or other, just become Krishna conscious, and the rules and regulations will follow. We should first fix our minds upon Krishna, and then the ability to follow the other rules and regulations will automatically follow. An acharya should devise a means by which people may somehow or other come to Krishna consciousness. First, they should become Krishna conscious, and all the prescribed rules and regulations may later gradually be introduced. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we follow this policy of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so potent that even when he was going through the Jharkhand forest, he could get the wild animals to chant and dance with him. And those who were naturally envious of each other, they were embracing one another while they were chanting Hare Krishna. So similarly, in America now, Srila Prabhupada is getting these practically, we can call them human, they were two-legged, but they knew absolutely no rules and regulations from the Vedas. And simply by getting them to chant Hare Krishna, gradually they were elevated to a more human standard. Now this is where the sloka comes from. Srimad Bhagavatam 7:1, 31 through 32. Narada is speaking to Yudhisthira Maharaj. And he's describing, Yudhisthira Maharaj was very surprised to hear that the two gatekeepers had been cursed and they came down as demons. And then even after they fought with the Lord, they became liberated and they were able to go back to Godhead. So this whole Leela in the 7th chapter, Yudhisthira Maharaj was asking Narada Muni, how is it that demons can become devotees, that devotees can become demons, and then they become devotees again? So now Narada Muni tells this secret, that my dear King Yudhisthira, I'll read the Sanskrit, Gopya kamad bayat kamso, dvesh aj chaidya dayo nripa, sambandhad vishnaya snehad, yuyam bhaktya vayam vibho. My dear King Yudhisthira, the gopis by their lusty desires, Kamsa by his fear, Shishupal and other kings by envy, the Yadus by their familial relationship with Krishna, you Pandavas by your great affection for Krishna, and we, meaning Narada, the general devotees, by our devotional service, have obtained the mercy of Krishna. Katamo pi na vena syat panchanam purusham prati tasmat kena pupayena mana krishne niveshayat. Somehow or other, one must consider the form of Krishna very seriously. Then, by one of the 5 different processes mentioned above, one can return home back to Godhead. Atheists, like King Vena, however, being unable to think of Krishna's form in any of these 5 ways, cannot attain salvation. Therefore, one must somehow think of Krishna, whether in a friendly way or inimically. So the gopis, of course, in a positive way, by their lusty desires. Kamsa was the greatest demon. By his fear, he was always thinking of Krishna. He was Krishna conscious, but in a negative way. Shishupal, he was so envious of Krishna that he couldn't stop thinking of him for a moment. He was also considered Krishna conscious because of the absolute nature of Krishna consciousness. The Yadus, well, they consider Krishna one of his family members, so they loved him like a family member. And the Pandavas had such an affectionate, friendly relationship with Krishna as his friends, Priyosime. So, and then the general devotees, which we hope that we will one day become as Narada Muni. So they get the mercy of the Lord, whether positively or negatively, somehow or other, you have to think of Krishna. So, you see here the Tasmat Kena Pupayena Pana Krishna Niveshayet. Somehow or other, you think of Krishna. You chant Hare Krishna, and then all the rules and regulations will come. So these slokas, Satsru Maharaj did not include in the Lilamrita, but I wanted you all to understand where this most important basic philosophy is coming from, that Prabhupada was able to, just by getting these young people to chant Hare Krishna, eventually they all became very strong, stalwart devotees of Krishna, and they were able to go all over the world and make other people Krishna conscious as well. Now this is a conversation about this same principle. Srila Prabhupada, yes, that is our ultimate aim, but that is stated by Rupa Goswami. Tasmat kena pupayena mana krishna niveshayat sarve vidhi nishedhasyur etayor eva kinkara. Somehow or another, bring him to chant Hare Krishna or to become little Krishna conscious. Then when he's little purified, then the vidhi nisheda. Vidhi means rules and regulations, and nisheda, that means that which we're not allowed to do. The positive, pravritti and nivritti. What we should do and what we should not do. They go together. Vidhi nisheda means the regulative principles. It is not rejected, but when he is little purified, vidhi nishedha syur etayor eva kinkara. Just like one, first of all, let him become rich, get some money. Then when he has got money, he can keep some servants, some assistants, some secretaries like that. First of all, earn money. So first, develop a taste for chanting Hare Krishna. And then after you've developed that taste, then you can start learning how to do worship, how to give classes, all the other angas of devotional service. Inherent in this attitude of Srila Prabhupada's and Srila Rupa Goswami's, this is from the Lilamrita that we're reading now, was a strong conviction about the purifying force of the holy name. If engaged in chanting Hare Krishna, even the most fallen person could gradually become a saintly devotee. Srila Prabhupada would often quote a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, affirming that persons addicted to sinful acts could be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam 2:4-18. Kirata Hunandra Pulinda Pulkasha Abira Shumba Yavana Kash Adaya Yenye Cha Papayad Apashraya Shraya Shudyanti Tasmai Prabhavishnave Namaha. The Kiratas, the Huns, the Andras, Pulindas, Pulkashas, Abiras, Shumbas, Yavanas, members of the Kasha races, and even others addicted to sinful acts, can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord, due to his being the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So, if you want to know what all of these different classes of the sinful human beings is, you can look up in 2:4-18. They're all still on the planet. If you ever go to Turkey, they call themselves Yavanas. They're very proud that they are the Yavanas. And the Huns, Prabhupada explains the Huns it's in between Russia and Germany. That's like the Polish area, Eastern Europe. So all of these classifications of sinful human beings are still on the planet. The Kashas, that's the Chinese, it's explained that they don't have any mustache. So everything's explained by Prabhupada, who these different tribes are. The Abiras we still have here. They're the tribal people who herd the animals, like that. All of them, if they simply chant Hare Krishna, they can all become purified. He knew that every Haight-Ashbury hippie was eligible to receive the mercy of the holy name, and he saw it as his duty to his spiritual master to distribute the gift of Krishna consciousness freely, rejecting no one. Yet while living amongst these mlechas, he required a certain standard of behavior, and he was adamant about preserving the purity of his Krishna consciousness society. So Prabhupada was tolerant to a point, but when it came to initiation, when someone became serious to become Prabhupada's followers, then they had to understand what the 4 regulative principles were. For example, if he were going to distribute free food to the public, it could not be ordinary food, but must be prasadam, food offered to Krishna. Feeding hungry people was futile unless they were given prasadam and the chance of liberation from birth and death. So there are many stories in the Shastras about the purificatory qualities of taking prasadam. And Srila Prabhupada, first of all, he had to teach the devotees how to make prasadam. And then from there, they had to learn how to offer to Krishna properly. And now Prabhupada is going to begin daily, massive prasad distribution. And although in the kirtans he allowed openness and free expression and welcomed the wildest participation, the transcendental sound of the holy name had to dominate. He never allowed the kirtan to degenerate into mere beating on drums. Has anyone been in a kirtan like that, where they forget about chanting and they're just chanting? Prabhupada didn't allow that. The holy name had to be there. Or chanting of any old words. Now Prabhupada was also very strict. For instance, when Prabhupada first gave us the Panchatattva mantra, it was Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. But because we have neighbors who also use the word Bhaja, Prabhupada, he wanted a distinction. So he changed it in the 70s to Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. He took the Bhaja away. And one time one of Prabhupada's godbrothers, who used to be our cook here, Anand Maharaj, who was also Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's cook. Now, we haven't been able to get rid of this one yet. He started a new form of mantras in the kirtans. Gaur Nityananda, Gaur Shri Advaita, Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Prabhupada never gave us that. That was from Ananda Maharaj, and he started it here. And whatever starts here ends up going all over the whole universe. So they're still singing that. Although Prabhupada, he told us not to sing that. It's not the proper way to have kirtan. So a lot of things sneak in to our kirtans that Prabhupada did not teach us. And that's why we have to read these kirtan standard books that are now being printed to understand what pure kirtan is as Prabhupada gave it to us. Nor could anyone in the group become so crazy that others would not be able to hear or take part in congregational chanting. Now, I haven't shown any of the videos at this time. There were videos made, and boy, they were really crazy. So that's why I'm not showing them, because you can see that the people, the holy name is so purifying that they're going into ecstasy, but they don't know how to express their ecstasy properly, and it becomes distracting, crazy practically. So Srila Prabhupada really had a big task on his hands to control these youngsters. In his attempts to somehow or other get these young people chanting Hare Krishna, Prabhupada instinctively knew what to allow and what not to allow. He was the master, and his new disciples followed him when he permitted an egoistic, sensual dancer to jump around the temple, or a drugged madman to argue with him in a question and answer period. When a person was too disruptive, Prabhupada was not afraid to stop him. But stopping was rare. The main thing was giving. Now, sometimes people would become very challenging, even to the point where they would violently challenge Srila Prabhupada. When Prabhupada was speaking about the Varnashram, the system of the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Sudras, how just like in the body we have different functions of the body parts. So one very challenging student stood up and he said, "So which class are you? First class?" And Prabhupada just put his head down and he said, "I am fifth class, because I am the servant of the other four classes." So Srila Prabhupada was so humble in that respect. He just came to give the whole world Krishna consciousness. He considered himself a servant. He was never condescending, that here he was, a disciple of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, coming in the line of the Parampara, and here we were so fallen, so unqualified. Never. He just saw us as children, who he was just like when you get the child to learn how to walk first. Of course they're going to fall down, but then you pick them up again, you get them walking again. So that's how Prabhupada treated all these youngsters, just like children, getting them to go on the path of Krishna consciousness. The kirtan lasted more than an hour, as the chanters joined hands and danced around the room, and incense poured out the front door. The morning and evening kirtans had already made the Radha Krishna temple popular in Haight-Ashbury, but when the devotees began serving a daily free lunch, the temple became an integral part of the community. Prabhupada told his disciples simply to cook and distribute prasadam. That would be their only activity during the day. In the morning they would cook, and at noon they would feed everyone who came, sometimes 150 to 200 hippies from the streets of Haight-Ashbury. Now, because Haight-Ashbury was like the Mecca of the hippies were coming from all over America, thinking that they would get some mystical experience there. And then when they get there, they find out there's excessive drug use, all types of illicit sex, and the police harass them. They were always living in fear of the police. So it wasn't the experience that they were looking for. And not only that, most of these young boys and girls did not have money. I remember when we went to Haight-Ashbury, when I met the devotees and they came around with the conch shell for donations, I didn't have one single penny to give them, nothing. We didn't know how we were going to eat, where we were going to live. This was hippie life at that time. We had no idea where our next meal was coming from. Fortunately, the government would give bags of welfare, like rations, and then we would be able to get some milk powder or some wheat or something like that. But there was no money. So when the devotees, by Prabhupada's brilliance, when he had them start this free lunch, hundreds and hundreds of starving hippies came, and they were all getting purified now, not only by chanting Hare Krishna, but now they were getting prasadam to build their spiritual bodies. Before the morning kirtan, the girls would put oatmeal on the stove, and by breakfast there would be a room full of hippies, most of whom had been up all night. They would sleep in the park, which was just a few blocks away, sleep in the park, and then they would come for a free meal. The cereal and fruit was for some the first solid food in days. So rice was not rice was considered for poor people in America. People didn't eat much rice in America. And dal was unheard of. We had never seen dal until Prabhupada taught us about dal. But we did have something called oats. So these oats, when you boil them in water and you add a little milk and you can add sugar, that was that heavenly porridge that they used to make in 26 2nd Avenue. So they brought the same system over there. They made big pots of this oat porridge, heavenly porridge. They put in some fruit. They would get the fruit by begging at the markets, the sabji mandis, and whatever. I remember on the day of my initiation, I wanted to give, you go out for Guru Dakshina. So I immediately ran out, and across the street from the temple was a fruit market. So I begged them, I said, please, can you give me something? They gave me a whole box of apricots, because when it goes past a certain day, they're not allowed to sell the things. So you get whole boxes, we get whole trucks of free fruits and vegetables from these markets, because after a certain date, they're not allowed to sell the things. If there's just a little bit of brown on it, they can't sell it anymore. So they would just cut out the bad parts and put that into the prasadam and be able to feed hundreds of people for free that way. That's how, if any of you have ever gotten peanut butter burfi. Well, peanut butter burfi, that's not Vedic. But in America, you can get from the welfare, the rations, huge tins of peanut butter. Peanut butter just means you roast the peanuts, you grind it up, and you put a little bit of oil in it. So they had all these big tins of peanut butter. What are they going to do with peanut butter? So they learned how to make peanut butter burfi instead of besan burfi. We didn't have chickpeas. So like that. It's just using your intelligence, yukta vairagya. But the main program was the lunch. See, this is the sabjis, all those boxes and boxes of things. They just, whatever they couldn't sell, they'd be happy to give to the devotees, because they knew that the devotees were feeding these starving hippies. Malati would go out and shop, getting donations whenever possible for whole wheat flour, garbanzo flour, that's chickpea besan, split peas, rice, and whatever vegetables were cheap or free: potatoes, carrots, turnips, rutabagas, and beets. Then every day the cooks would prepare spiced mashed potatoes, buttered chapatis, split pea dal, and a vegetable dish for 200 people. The lunch program was possible because many merchants were willing to donate to the recognized cause of feeding hippies. Harsharani was one of the early devotees who joined Prabhupada in San Francisco. The lunch program attracted a lot of the Hippie Hill crowd, who obviously wanted food. They were really hungry. And there were other people who would come also. People who were working with the temple but weren't initiated. The record player would be playing the Swami's record. It was a nice family atmosphere. Haridas, you remember Haridas? That was Harvey Cohen, who painted the first picture of the Panchatattva. And then when he moved to California, he gave Prabhupada his apartment at the Bowery. So Haridas, now that Krishna consciousness and Prabhupada has come to California, Harvey Cohen, who got initiated as Haridas now, he became active again, helping the temple and helping Srila Prabhupada. He remembers, it was taken outside too, outside the front, but the main food was served inside. It was amazing. The people would just all huddle together, and we would really line them wall to wall. A lot of them would simply eat and leave. Well, they might have they thought that they were just eating and leaving, but they didn't realize that they were getting purified and building their spiritual body by eating this prasadam. Other stores along Haight-Ashbury were selling everything from beads to rock records. But our store was different because we weren't selling anything. We were giving it away. And we were welcoming everybody. We were providing a kind of refuge, not refugee, from the tumult and madness of the scene. So it was, in that sense, a hospital. And I think a lot of people were helped, and maybe even saved. I don't mean only their souls, I mean their minds and bodies were saved because of what was going on in the streets that they just simply couldn't handle. I'm talking about overdoses of drugs, people who were plain lost and needed comforting, and who sort of wandered or staggered into the temple. Some of them stayed and became devotees, and some just took prasadam and left. Daily we had unusual incidents, and Swamiji witnessed it and took part in it. The lunch program was his idea. So we remember the Salvation Army when Prabhupada was trying to, because he wasn't allowed to collect donations from in America at that time. He was only given permission by the Indian embassy to collect donations from India to build his temple. So he made an arrangement with the Salvation Army that they would send him a donation and he would send them donations in India, back and forth. Because they were in the same business. They were both saving souls. The Salvation Army is the wing. It's like of course, we're also considered to be like an army, and Prabhupada, he's our Senapati, our general. So the Salvation Army is the Christian army of saving souls, going all over the world, into the most backward places, telling them about the Supreme Lord, about Jesus being the Savior. Of course, we do the same thing. We describe how Lord Chaitanya, he's brought the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So, in other words, it was a mutual relationship and a mutual appreciation as well. So Mukunda remembers, the Salvation Army came in one day for lunch. They just unloaded a whole truckload of people on us, about 30 or 40. Because how the Salvation Army would make their money was, it's still going on now, people, because it's a consumer society in the West. Commercials, big billboards, buy, all these things that you don't need, brands, big brands. So people would always buy. They had nothing to do. That's how all the malls have come up here, because they're following the Western culture. That you don't have anything to do, you stop going to the temple now, you stop going to pravachans, so you go to malls and wander around and buy things. And you take the things home, and they're useless. You don't actually need them. So the Salvation Army set up a system that all the things that you bought that you're not using anymore, all the fashions that are out of style now this year, you donate it to the Salvation Army. And they would take these things, wash them very carefully, and set them up like stores. And people would come in and re-buy the things, and that's how they would make their money for their missionary activities. So this is one of their shops. And even the devotees would go in. I would go in to get my Indian clothes there because, where are you going to, you buy something for practically nothing because it's charity for them. And there's a story that we always hear, every year we hear about Jayananda, how he went in and he didn't pay. It was 50 cents. It was for a new set of clothes. And they arrested him, took him to the court, and he started describing how the money belongs to God. I didn't want to use it on myself. And he's crying to the judge, and the judge starts crying, and the judge said, "That's all right, I'll pay for you." Larry Shippen. Some of the community of loose people cynically took advantage of the free food. That's okay, they were being tricked. They didn't appreciate the Swami because they said he was, in his own way, an orthodox minister. And they were much more interested in being unorthodox. It was a fairly cynical thing. And we have so many people also lining up here, waiting for prasadam. They're not interested in the temple, they're not interested in doing service, they're interested in eating. But they don't realize what's going to happen when they eat enough prasadam. It's like Prabhupada explains it to, how does an epidemic get started? There's one sick person, and if you accidentally take his contaminated food and eat that, you get that disease. So by taking the prasadam and the mahaprasadam, you get the disease of Krishna consciousness. They're all getting infected. Those who were more interested and had questions, the spiritual seekers, would visit Swamiji in his room. Many of them would come in complete anxiety over the war in Vietnam or whatever was going on. Trouble with the law, bad experiences on drugs, a falling out with school or family. Now, we see, because we're trying to be on the mode of goodness, let's say, we see the police as our friends, right? That we can go to the police if we have a problem, things like that. But for these hippies, the police were a great danger. I remember when we were driving to get to Haight-Ashbury, going across the country, one night the police stopped us. And they're looking for a way to harass us, or a way to arrest us. So they took every single thing we had, went through everything we had, looking for drugs or whatever it was they were looking for. They couldn't find anything. And then they got angry because they couldn't find any. They took all the time to search all of our stuff. They couldn't find anything. And I had a knife for cutting vegetables. And they said, oh, this is a dangerous weapon. We're going to take this knife. And I said, yeah, I just cut my vegetables with it. Please, can you let us keep the... No, this is dangerous. We're taking this. They had to get something. So the police would harass these young people and have fun beating them up. So, whatever happens sometimes. So they were scared, even of the people who were supposed to be helping them. And they were afraid that they were going to get caught and put into the army and sent to Vietnam to die there. So they would come to Prabhupada with their problems. And by this time, Prabhupada knew all the answers to those problems. That yes, you just become Krishna conscious. Anyone who's Krishna conscious, we're now an incorporated society. You don't have to go to Vietnam. So they would become Krishna conscious, so they wouldn't have to go to the army then. There was much public concern about the huge influx of youth into San Francisco, a situation that was creating an almost uncontrollable social problem. Police and social welfare workers were worried about the health problems and poor living conditions, especially in Haight-Ashbury. Some middle-class people feared a complete hippie takeover. So when you see this, the people have nowhere to live, they have no houses, they just live on the hill there. This is Hippie Hill. They would sleep there at night, and then if they were smart, they would come to the temple for prasadam. And there was no cleanliness. I remember when we reached there, it was the first time in my life I had ever seen a cockroach. I'd never seen, because our houses are clean and, everything was proper. And then you go to places like this, and of course there's all types of uncleanliness. It was frightening to see that, where do you live when there's so many people living here without money, without homes, without food? So even the middle class people, they were afraid the hippies were going to take over the whole city. The local authorities welcomed the service offered by Swami Bhaktivedanta's temple. And when civic leaders in Haight-Ashbury talked of forming a council to deal with the crisis, it had become a crisis now with all these young people, they requested Swami Bhaktivedanta to take part. He agreed, but lost interest after the first meeting. No one seemed seriously interested in hearing his solution. So we had that experience when we were preaching in America. We would go to the prisons to preach. And because we would go, we weren't allowed to distribute prasadam in the prisons, but we would have kirtan, we would have class, and the prisoners really appreciated it a lot. A lot of the prisoners were hippies. So the council there in the prison, they invited us that because you're having a good impression on the prisoners, they're responding nicely, why don't you take part in our councils, in the meetings, so that we can all work together to help these prisoners become more socially acceptable. So we went to a meeting and then wrote to Prabhupada that we've been invited to be a part of this council. And Prabhupada wrote back that no, do not become a part of the council. That's their responsibility to take care of the prisons. It's our responsibility simply to get them to chant Hare Krishna, to help understand the philosophy, and get them to follow the 4 regulative principles. And when they get out of jail, and some of them would come to the temple once they were released, when they get out of jail, if they are able to follow our principles, then they could move into the temple and become devotees. So Prabhupada made it quite clear, we're not interested in taking part in the government responsibilities. We are here for the purpose of giving them Krishna consciousness. Master Subramania. Now, Master Subramania was an American born in California who went to India to find a guru, as many Americans did. He ended up in Sri Lanka and he learned about Shaivism. He became a Shivite. And he brought that back to America and opened up ashrams to teach people how to become devotees of Lord Shiva. So this is what Master Subramania has to say. A lot of responsible citizens in San Francisco were very happy that Swami Bhaktivedanta was working amongst the young people. The young people at that time were searching and needed somebody of a very high caliber who would take an interest in them and who would say, you should do this and you should not do that. And that's exactly what Prabhupada was doing. Once they appreciated the chanting of Hare Krishna and they were ready to hear him, then he started introducing the vidhis, the rules and regulations. Here we have a picture behind Srila Prabhupada. You'll remember Subal. That's Subal after he cut his hair. And on the other side is Nandarani, who Prabhupada said was the mother of Krishna, though she didn't know who Krishna was or who Krishna's mother was. But she was happy that Prabhupada thought that she was something of worth. So here they are chanting with Srila Prabhupada at the park. The consensus was that no one could tell the young people what to do because they were completely out of hand with drugs and so forth. But Swamiji told them what to do, and they did it. And everyone was appreciative, especially the young people. Harsharani again. Just from a medical standpoint, doctors didn't know what to do with people on LSD. The police and the free clinics in the area couldn't handle the overload of people taking LSD. The police saw Swamiji as a certain refugee. I think it means refuge. Michael Bowen remembers. Bhaktivedanta had an amazing ability through devotion to get people off drugs, especially speed, heroin, burnt out LSD cases, all of that. So speed is a type of, it's a chemical, and when you take it, it speeds up all of your activities. And you can't sleep. You can go on for days without sleeping until you crash. And then you have no energy left in your body whatsoever. So that's speed, and very dangerous drug. Heroin, of course, is opium, and that's the most dangerous of drugs because you become addicted to it and you can't live without it. Very hard to break that addiction. And LSD was the newest type of, it's not addictive, but it changes your mental perspective. And if you take too much of it, you lose your mental capacity to understand even that you're a human being anymore. If you read the book written by Radhanath Swami, Journey Home, he talks about some of his friends who took too much LSD and they were never able to come back to their proper human consciousness again, because it alters the workings within the brain. And the police and the clinics didn't know how to deal with so many young people having these drug problems of addiction and overdoses. Haridas. The police used to come with their paddy wagons. Paddy wagons is pickup trucks. Through the park in the early hours of the morning and pick up runaway teenagers sleeping in the park. Because anyone under 18, you weren't allowed to be separate from your parents. It's the same here, same all over the world, under 18. So they would look for the youngsters, put them in the paddy wagons, and try to get them to go back to their homes. The police would round them up and try to send them back home. The hippies needed all the help they could get, and they knew it. And the Radha Krishna temple was certainly a kind of spiritual haven. Kids sensed it. They were running, living on the streets. No place where they could go, where they could rest, where people weren't going to hurt them. Because anytime you have youth, you have the predators who will try to take advantage of these innocent youth who are looking for some experience in life that will help uplift them, but then you have people who will come and try to take advantage of them. So actually many of them were scared. And the temple became a refuge and like a hospital as well. A lot of kids would literally fall into the temple. I think it saved a lot of lives. There might have been a lot more casualties if it hadn't been for Hare Krishna. It was like opening a temple in a battlefield. It was the hardest place to do it, but it was the place where it was most needed. Although the Swami had no precedence for dealing with any of this, he had never seen drugged out hippies before in his life. He applied the chanting with miraculous results. The chanting was wonderful. It worked. Swamiji knew that only Krishna consciousness could help. Others had their remedies, but Prabhupada considered them mere patchwork. He knew that ignorantly identifying the self with the body was the real cause of suffering. How could someone help himself, what to speak of others, if he didn't know who he was? If he didn't know that the body was only a covering of the real self, the spirit soul, which could be happy only in his original nature as an eternal servant of Krishna. And this is what Prabhupada, by his lecturing, although we heard when Dayananda and Nandarani first came to the temple, they couldn't even understand Prabhupada's accent, but they saw that all these nice people were there, the initiated disciples. They made friends with them. They kept trying. They came again. They came in the morning when it wasn't so crowded. And gradually they were able to understand the philosophy that Prabhupada was feeding to them, spoon feeding to them, through his classes, through his books, and through the chanting. Okay, so it's past 7. There are many more interesting adventures that we'll be reading about. Prabhupada here. I'll just show you some. There you go. This is, the police brought him. They said, what did the police say? A policeman stuck his head in the door and smiled. We decided to bring him by here because we thought maybe you guys could help him. So even the police understood that the devotees could. The police didn't know what to do with these crazy people, so they brought them to the temple. So we'll hear about that next week. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.